Ian, do you hear me? Ian, can you put yourself on mute when you get a chance, or just there should be a little mute button on the bottom there. It's okay, or if you just stop typing, I'll call on you in a second. I just can hear background noise. That's all. It sounds great. Sounds great. Okay. All right. Okay. What's up, everybody? Welcome to another episode here of Crush Live Collins. I am your host here, Bart Hanson. It is Monday, February 5th. And of course, we do this show every single Monday at 4 p.m. Eastern Time. Although next week, we are actually going to do the show on the Super Bowl. That is the plan. We are going to do the show on the Super Bowl. And I think what we're going to do is do it right around 2 p.m. Eastern Time. The Super Bowl doesn't start until like 6:30-ish, 6:20 Eastern Time, something like that. So we did that last year, and I think it's just kind of cool to do it like leading into the Super Bowl. So if you do want to get in on the show, you can click on the link in the description, and that will get you instructions on how to pre-submit your hand, because you must pre-submit your hand. We screen all the calls, and the what was I going to say? Yeah. So I take all the I read all the sub emails, and Mike actually passes along the best non-sub emails to me. But if you are a CLP subscriber, you will always get priority. We've got 5 calls here today, and we're going to start it off here with Ian, who is a CLP subscriber. Hello, Ian. You can unmute yourself. You are up first, sir. Hello.
Hi, Bart.
How's it going, Ian?
Pretty well. How's everything on your end?
Good. So you got a hand for us coming out of where?
This is in South Florida, Seminole, Coconut Creek Casino.
Coconut Creek. I don't know if I've ever played there or what,
It's
but
like
I've heard the games are pretty
30
good.
minutes away from the Hollywood Hard Rock.
Right. Coconut Creek, kind of one of the smaller, kind of a smaller room, right?
Yeah.
Okay. And what's the game level you're playing out?
I'm playing 2-5.
Okay, so 2-5.
Max buy-in is 1,000.
Okay. All right. So 2,000 max buy-in, 2-5, and how deep are you for this hand?
I am 1,000. I cover both players. I have like 1,100.
All right. So
I think Big Blind has 1,000. Oh yeah, I'll mention it during the hand. Sorry.
right. So what's the effective stack, which of course is like probably the one that's
Okay. Effective stack is 700.
Okay, good use of the term effective stack, Ian. A lot of people don't know that term. Effective stack, of course, means usually the smallest stack that's relevant to the hand. People are like, I have 2,000 effective. My opponent has 500. Well, the effective stack's 500. All right, 700 effective. Okay.
So I just want to throw in some like information before I start.
Okay.
So my image, I have a loose aggressive image. I've been opening quite a bit, and so I guess like my lifting range is kind of capped, but especially from the button. I'm the button in this hand.
Okay.
So that's what I'm gonna start with, and okay. So the action is we have 3 limps.
Okay.
And it gets to me on the button, and I overlimp with 6-4 of clubs.
Okay.
And big blind, when it gets to the big blind, he raises to 35.
Okay.
And under the gun, low jack, high jack, and myself call.
So Ian, I know you're a CLP subscriber because I read your email. In the CLP bucket list. Did you listen to the podcast that came out this week by chance? The CLP podcast?
I did not.
Okay, so the reason why I bring that up is that a couple things here pre-flop. I had a hand in a podcast that was similar to this. I didn't overlimp it, but I did call a raise. Like I overcalled the raise. Like instead of like your setup where it went limp, overlimp, it went like raise, call, and I called on the button with 7-8 suited. And then the guy in the big blind raised, like as a 3-bet, right? Here, he's raising straight. And everybody called. Just like you in this situation here, right? And the thing that I sort of stated in the podcast is like people can look at that like as a double flat. And you use the word sort of capped, which you're actually using correct in this sense, like because you overlimped, right? You don't have aces, king, you're not going to have a pair above eights, right? And probably like ace, king, and ace, queen. Absolutely, that's true. So I actually double flatted with 7-8 of spades. But the thing was that you're getting such a price and you're closing the action on the button. If you were going to ever call in the big blind closing the action, how can you not call in this spot closing the action? So on paper, people might say, oh, this is sloppy. Like, first of all, people might say, oh, don't overlimp this hand. We won't get into that. 6-4 suit is probably pretty close. But once you call, like once you put in the first limp, I don't see how you could possibly fold closing the action pre-flop, in the end. Now, in Crush Live Poker, of course, we sort of teach a kind of a simplified approach to pre-flop in these multi-way spots where I say that like once a few people limp in, I'm really only ISO raising my range that I would normally just straight open from the first few positions. And then everything else playable, you can overlimp small pairs, suited connectors, things like that. Sure, someone could say that there are reverse implied odds with this hand. It's a gapped suited connector and it's a little bit low on the high card value. I don't think it's terrible just saying that, but I will say I can't see how you could possibly limp and then fold. So I have no problem with you obviously continuing once the guy, raises. So it looks like it's 5 ways, including the guy?
Yeah, I have like 175.
Yeah. Okay, so 175, you overlimp with 6-4 clubs, guy in the big blind raises, everybody calls. Okay, yep.
And my question is this just a fold pre-flop?
Well, well, I mean, it really depends on the rake and the drop structure, I think, and the sort of the stack depth. If you were playing to one extreme, if you were playing in a very sort of like, say, the 2-3 game in California with like a 300 max buy-in, where they're going to drop the full amount no matter what, I think you probably should fold. If it was a drop is one where they take the entire amount, right? Now, in between is a rake where they take a percentage up to an amount, and then you have time, right? Like in Texas. I think Florida's a rake. Is that right? Up to a certain amount?
Yeah. So in this casino, it's a $6 rake max and $2 for the jackpot. So $8 total.
So is it a percentage up to $6?
Yeah, percentage. Yeah, so it's like up to like $50.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, depending on how deep the stacks are, you could absolutely make a case for folding. I kind of think like the deeper you are and the weaker the players, the more it becomes a playable hand. But if you are in a very sort of very small stakes live game with very small stacks and a high rake structure, yes, I would fold.
Yes.
But
so
I think it's
like
close.
Like I've been experimenting with like limping, and because like there was like a lot of weak players in hand, and like I have a habit of just like kind of like trying to steal pots, like with the bad run out for the pre-flop raiser.
Right. And obviously it becomes harder to do that though when it's more multi-way, right?
That's true. And I didn't think about that.
So we're 175 to the flop. Okay, what's the flop?
So the flop is 6 of spades,
okay,
6 of diamonds, and the 2 of clubs.
6 of spades, 6 of diamonds, 2 of clubs. So you flop trips.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's pretty dry.
Yep.
So the pre-flop raiser checks,
okay,
and the next not next stack, but like it went check, hijack, make bets 55.
Okay.
So a little under third. Third pot, and then I thought a little bit, but I didn't want to think too long, and I just min clicked to 125. I usually never min click. I don't know why, but my gut just told me to min click here. Is like the best way to get like more money in the pot.
Yeah, this is interesting. But I thought that you were going to say that you were going to call. I could actually see, I'm not a huge fan of slow playing all that much, like at these levels, like in these games. It's a little bit different though. I will say that it's a little bit different though when the pre-flop raiser is not the person that you're going to raise against here. Like here it gets checked all the way over to the guy in the hijack. Sometimes, here's a reason for calling. Sometimes that guy who's the pre-flop raiser might check an overpair. It happens probably, it's much less common at the lower stakes in a given situation. It just kind of sucks like if you raise and then somebody folds out like tens or jacks, it was kind of playing it sort of safe. Now, with that being said, if the pre-flop raiser was the one that c-bet, I would be doing more raising than calling most likely, even on a dry board, even though it's tough to balance because sort of counterintuitively you're playing the hand more deceptively than by slow playing. Here,
Right.
I would probably do a lot of calling. I don't think a raise is absolutely terrible. And to be honest with you, a min raise, you could be like trying to find out where you are with like
Yeah, exactly.
fours or something like that. So
Yeah, because I would do that with like eights or nines, trying to see where I'm at. But usually I never use them in click, so I don't even know why I did them in click here. But
so you
but
min
yeah,
click
I
to
was trying to
125.
make it maybe seem like I had like 5-4 suited or like a gut shot, and just trying to realize my equity by checking back turn.
So you go to 125 and what happens?
Um, Big blind calls.
Okay, so what do you think the big blind has then when he
So
check and then calls a raise?
so when he calls, I put him on like aces or kings that doesn't need much protection. Like I feel like, or maybe queens. He could have been like he was looking for like probably looking to check raise, but when I min click, he just flats now. So I kind of like I was like I was kind of bummed because I didn't think he would like
Well, I think
just flat.
we definitely know he probably has an overpair, right?
Yeah. That's
Yeah.
so that's pretty much what I range him to.
hmm
And so it's either ace or king that doesn't need like much protection. So I think his plan was probably to check raise on this board if someone bets, but
I
I
don't know if
guess
he
like
was
I
going to
kind of
check
ruined his
raise,
plan a little
but
bit.
I don't know if he was going to check raise, but he was sort of playing it cautiously. So you go to 125, big blind flat calls, and then what happens?
Oh, by the way, I have to add, I want to add some information on big blind and the hijack
Okay.
because that's well, he calls up 125 and hijack calls as well.
All right. So the hijack was a better call. Okay.
Right.
Yeah. So
Big blind seems like a competent player. I've seen him overfold to like aggression,
hmm
and I'm not too sure. It's like pretty much like everybody's table I haven't played with before because I just finally started playing 2-5 consistently. And the hijack, I don't have much information, but he tried trapping me earlier. When he saw me playing with my green chips, but I was folding. I usually just shuffle my chips,
So the
and then
big blind started this hand with 700, right? And how much did the hijack
no,
start?
big blind's 1,000,
Oh, he's got
hijack is
1,000.
700.
Okay. All right. So that makes a difference, obviously. So the hijack
Yeah,
has got 700. They both call, and it looks like we're at 550 to the turn, right?
yeah.
Right.
So hijack tried trapping me earlier. He was about to I think raise, and he saw me shuffling my green chips, and then he ended up limping. But I wasn't gonna play the hand. I had like a bad hand, so I folded, and someone else raised, and he limp raised. So I don't know if that's gonna play. I mean, I that played into my head during this hand, but
Okay.
yeah, that's the information I'm gonna put out there.
So what's the turn?
The turn is the 10 of spades.
Okay, that's a pretty big blank. And it gets checked to you?
Yeah, it checks to me, and this is where I made the mistake. Well, I think I made a mistake here, or like just maybe like my min click, because I just don't know where hijack is. I just kind of hyper focused on big blind when he called. I was like, all right, how do I get max value from someone with aces or like kings here? And it
Okay.
was like a dry board, and I didn't account for the backdoor spades coming in. But so I just snap check back.
Wow. Yeah, I would not have checked back here. You
Yeah,
don't have
yeah,
to go crazy large. I mean, it sounds to me like you're concerned about if you put too much pressure on this guy, you might fold out an
yeah. He was
overpair.
over folding quite a bit, so
Right, but again, the thing though is that it's so deceptive to play a six this way on this board because it is mostly call that I don't know if overpairs are mostly folding here. So, I mean, you don't have to go crazy. You might even institute like a half pot size bet here. If you bet half pot, say the big blind called, the other guy folded. I mean, the pot would be over 1,000, at this point, and he'd have like 600 left, which kind of sets up a nice little bet at the end. So, I understand what you're saying. I think with the third guy in there, though, it kind of messes things a little bit up. I mean, you're sort of playing this in a really weird way where you raise the flop, making it look like you're weak, and then you check back the turn, possibly to get it, an overpair to bet at the end. The only problem, though, with that is that there is a guy in the middle, so you're not going to necessarily see that reflective or that reflex bet from the big blind with an overpair for value because he still has to worry about the guy in the middle a little bit.
right.
So 550 to the river, okay.
And the river is the 7 of spades, so it brings in the backdoor flush.
So 6-6 deuce. Hero again has 6-4 of clubs as an overcall. Big blind raise, call. And big blind checks the flop. He gets over to the hijack who bets 55. Hero min clicks to 125. Big blind calls, call, turns the 10 of spades, putting backdoor spades out there, checks through, hero checks back. Now the river's the 7 of spades. So 6, 6, deuce, 10, 7, backdoor spades come in. Okay.
So big blind leads out for 125, and hijack shoves for 550.
Wow.
And I ended up tanking for like
Hold on,
maybe like
before you tell us what you do here, that's quite interesting. So the hijack is shoving here. Obviously, the hands that you obviously lose to a backdoor flush, and the big blind might have an overpair here, but
right.
he probably doesn't have spades all that much, and he's probably making a value bet like we talked about. The hijack shoving here for 550. Now, of course, you are under repped because you sort of min clicked and then check back turn. I wonder if this could be like 6, 7, 7s. If the guy had like deuce, deuce, and then he was going to try to pile in. Wow, that's so 125 and he shoves for 550. So the pot is 675, like 1225, 550 for you to call. I think this is a fold, man. And the other thing too is that like once you call, if the big blind's any type of player, he should never ever overcall with an overpair. If you look at the action on the river, right?
Right.
Yeah, I kind of want to fold here, and it looks like the chat agrees as well. Oh, Eden Rocks is in the live chat. Hello, Eden Rocks, host of Spaces, Spicy Spaces this week with Garrett Edelstein and Ryan Feldman. I listened to that. What did you end up doing?
Yeah, so I tanked for like 2-3 minutes trying to put on my hand, and the hands I could put them on is like 5-3 of spades, 5-4 of spades, 4-3 of spades. That would like continue, or maybe like a middling pair that he probably had, or probably like pocket sevens, pocket tens. And the only reason I say pocket tens because he would limp, because he was trying to trap me earlier. So I usually I wouldn't even put tens in his range, but like I put tens because he was trying to get tricky against me, trying to probably like limp raise me if I have raised. But yeah, so I ended up folding.
And then did we get a reveal?
Yeah, I mean, no, I didn't get a reveal. Big blind tanks, and then he folds 2 black aces face up.
Really? Wow.
And then the other guy didn't show.
I mean, it's funny because there are a lot of guys in the comments like have gotten on us when we don't have a reveal, but it seems like everybody's in line here that this is a fold at the end. Whether it's interesting, like your line, I talked about why I wouldn't take this line. I would still bet turn, but it still doesn't really matter in the fact that, if a guy like, again, the general population has not shown me that they're really capable of bluff raising all that much in this situation, multi-way from the middle, in terms of like the hijack, like having a hand that bluff raises here. So I think you made a pretty decent fold. I appreciate calling.
I was thinking, because if hijack folds, then I think I could just shove for value, right? I mean, if hijack flats, I could just shove for value, right?
If the hijack, so if the hijack folds, I think you
flat.
No, I know, but if the hijack folds, I think you have to raise. You played it this way. Now, if the hijack flats, I mean, I don't know if I would shove, but I think I would probably put in a raise.
Oh, a raise, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
And what if on the flop, say like it checks to me, my idea, what I was gonna do, I was gonna bet 150 on the flop if it checked to me. What do you think about that sizing?
I don't know if you have to go that large. I mean, you want some inferior hands to call. I would definitely start with a bet, though. I probably would bet maybe like
a little bit smaller.
I would probably bet 60 or 75, to be honest.
60, 75? Okay.
Yeah,
because I was trying to just decide between the size if it checked to me, and yeah. All right. I was leaning to 150, but
Ian, I appreciate the call. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, Bart.
All right, let's move along here. Let's go to our next caller, and this is gonna be Mr. Robin. Hello, you are up next, sir.
Hey, how's it going, Bart?
How's it going?
Good.
Good hand for us.
How are you?
Where's this one played out of?
This one is played out of Playground in Montreal.
Okay, so Playground, Montreal. And the game?
We're playing 5-10. I have 2,300, and the villain has me covered.
Is this a 2K cap or a 3K cap or?
2.5.
2.5. Oh,
Yeah,
interesting.
it's 500 to 2.5.
Okay. All right. So 510, 2,300 effective, Canadian, and 2.5 max buy-in. Okay.
Yeah. So there's a $20 straddle. I'm only maybe 1 or 2 orbits in. So I look down at black queens under the gun, and I open a 60.
Is it straddled every hand, or you just said you started?
I just got there. I think it was like half the table was straddling. I usually straddle as well. There seemed to be it seemed like a pretty fun table, so most people were straddling.
Okay, so you go to 60 from the effective like under the gun. Okay.
Yeah. Button calls, and we go heads up.
So button calls and your heads up.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the flop comes 5 of hearts, 7 of spades, 8 of hearts.
5 of hearts, 7 of spades, 8 of hearts. Looking at the pot right around maybe 130 and change, something like that. Not the best flop for you against a flatting range here in the field.
Yeah, from what I'd seen so far though, this guy seemed like there was 2 or 3 really fun players at the table, and this guy was definitely one of them. Like playing a large percentage of hands for, even flat calling 3-bets from just the 2 orbits that I sat down. So he definitely is a big fun player.
Okay.
I
mean, I would say if you're going in with that, I mean, I don't know how much of a sample size you have. I mean, obviously the theory would say here quite a bit that you're supposed to, as you go up, you're supposed to have respect for the board, right? You're supposed to have respect for the board and have some checks on boards like this. Might even be like a check 100 out of this particular configuration. With that being said, I think a very good deviation against weaker players, and what I would often advocate, as we do on Crush Live Poker, which is a small stakes exploit, is betting a larger volume of hands on these types of boards with overpairs without respect for the board, because when you're playing against somebody who VPIPs too much, they end up with a lot of hands that are draws that can call down, and they're not really playing off of the board. They're playing more off of their hand themselves. So I would absolutely have a different approach to this board against sort of somewhat of a VIP type player versus maybe somewhat of a solid player at this level.
Yeah, 100%. I think if it was 1-3 or 2-5, like I would bet this almost 100%. If it was a regular at the table at this stake, I probably wouldn't bet. But this guy was the biggest fun player, so
you bet?
I bet 90.
Okay,
and he called.
So here bets. So you take a little bit of a larger sizing here. Bets 90.
Yeah, I just figured there was a ton of draws. I don't know. If I'm gonna bet this board, I think betting bigger just because he's gonna have so many. Like he's gonna have every draw under the sun, like open ender. Flush draws, pair plus straight draws.
Yeah, and usually you don't see the type of light floats that, like, he's not going to call Queen Jack offsuit anyways. You know what I mean? Like, he either missed or he connected in some way, so I'm okay with it. All right, so 310 to the turn here.
So then the turn is the 4 of diamonds.
4 of diamonds. Okay, so that puts a one-liner out there. Puts a one-liner out there to a 6, right? So the board's 8, 7, 5, 4.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, obviously not the best card in the deck, so I check.
Mm-hmm.
And he bets 250.
Button bets 250.
Yeah.
So we do have a, we have a term that I made up called Fifth Street Chicken on Crush Live Poker, which means that, and I'm not saying that this hand necessarily applies because the board is quite scary, but sometimes you call and you make it look like you're going to call across rivers and you're almost daring somebody to bluff at the end, and that will tend to decrease their bluffing frequency. And you're basically hoping for it to go check, check. Like I said, this isn't necessarily the absolute best example of that. The only thing I would say about, puts a one-liner out there to a 6. It kind of seems like, though, with this guy, he's calling with any pair. I mean, obviously, he's going to call with any pair plus straight draw, right? 5, 6, 7, 6, 8, 6, something like that. Am I ready to fold now? He took a pretty large sizing. It's also interesting to note, like, these types of players where they take this type of sizing with, 2 pair, something like that. I mean, if I was against some guy that just doesn't bluff all that much, I might just give it up now. But I could see continuing on. There's just not going to be, you're going to have to figure out what you're going to do at the end on a blank. I mean, even before you tell me what happens, my question is if you call, okay, so say you call the 250 here, and then the river's just like a total brick. And I'm even going to say like and when a total brick like an offsuit deuce, it might be one of the biggest bricks. Like, and you check and he bets again. Does it change things in your mind that he's bet again, or do you think that you have to call because you called the turn, you have to call the river? If
I just think from what I've seen from this guy, like folding here is like just I think too weak. My hand is still like really strong, and then on the river, if it is a brick, I guess I would just it would depend on how much he would bet. I think.
Okay.
Yeah, I think if he bet like maybe under half or like half, that just seems like super value heavy. And then if he bets big, I don't know. There's not too many hands that he could do that with that aren't just a straight or the nuts.
Well, it is. Well, that's interesting though, because if he bets big, he inherently polarizes himself, right? Then you take out any types of hands that he might be taking for trying to take you for value, like a 2-pair type of holding against a probable 1-pair. So, and then usually the worse the player, the more they do want to go to showdown in position without a very strong hand. So you have to take that into account. So I assume you called, right?
Yeah, I call.
Okay. 8-10 to the river.
Yeah, well, with the 20, so 830, just with the $20 straddle, but
okay.
So 830 to the river, and now the river's the ace of hearts.
Ace of hearts.
So, yeah, front door flush comes in now.
Wow. So the front door comes in, one-liner here to a 6, and now you're like, I mean, the first thing off the cuff is like, well, you're beating somebody who's, calling with a heart draw, and now the flush came in, which is true, but then I will say, if you, obviously, I assume you're going to check. When you check, if he bets very, very large again, it starts to really get into a situation where, again, if he's a weak player, now he might not even be betting straights, really, right? Forget about it, sets or 2-pair or anything like that.
Yeah, so I black queen, so I'm the queen of hearts or anything. So I check, and he bombs it. That's 725. Doesn't really think too long. Just kind of grabs a stack of green and tosses it in there.
Well, I mean, what I would say is that with this type of line, it's almost like it's a flush or nothing. Now, I'm not saying that you call. I'm just saying that when he takes this type of, sizing at the end, I really, really doubt that it's just a naked 6. One of the few live tells that I really put a lot of credence in here, Robin, is bet pacing. And I remember doing a video that actually set our YouTube channel off right before COVID in 2020. And when I talk about bet pacing, I talk about if you can get a sense for your opponent making a bet with a speed where it almost seems like he has no regard for the fact that the nuts or the hand itself has changed somewhat. And the reason why I say that, if you did get that sense in this particular hand, if he made a flush, you would think he would pause and think about his sizing, right? And then if he had a set or he had a straight, you would also think that he would pause and try to figure out whether or not he was going to bet this card, right? Now that the front door heart comes in. So if you get into a situation where you sort of sense or suss out that a villain isn't really thinking about the card that has changed the hand in a fundamental way, like obviously like this card has, then sometimes you can catch somebody on a bluff. So I don't know if you got any type of sense for bet pacing here or what.
Well, when he bets so big on the turn and then bets so big on the river, his story doesn't, I don't know, to me, like I just try to put people on hands by just figuring out what kind of story they're trying to tell. And when you bet huge on the turn and then bet huge on the river, there's only a few hands that you can do that with. A6 would be one of them, but now we've got the ace of hearts. So it'd have to be either 6-7 of hearts or 9-6 of hearts, where he could just be like, well, it doesn't matter. I've got basically the nuts. I'm just going to bet huge. But then that leaves every other hand where you can't really do that with. A 6, when the front door, I can have a ton of flushes here. So when the flush comes in and he bets big again without any thought, it's like, well, okay, you said you had a straight or 2-pair on the turn, but you're betting huge now. If you had a 6, you would 100% think about it. He probably wouldn't check back. I think he would probably bet maybe, at least I would bet maybe 250, 300 here with a straight on the river and then fold to a raise. But he didn't even think about it. He just grabbed a stack of chips and kind of put it in the middle. So
Well, I think
I
you're
almost
answering my question then about bet pacing. I mean, that's really what that means is if you don't think he thinks about it, it is somewhat telling because, again, even if he made the flush, he should think about it. And if he had some other value hand that beats you that's not a flush, he should also think about it. Just one other thing, too. I mean, there are a couple other sort of flushes that he might run into, but they would have to be played somewhat passively on the flop, which would have been like combo draws, like a 9-10 of hearts, big combo draw, right? Like Jack 9 of hearts, something like that. So, what are the bluffs that we're left with here? It would be something like a 9-10, a Jack 10, a Jack 9 that decided to represent the scare card on the turn, and then obviously follows through in the end when he has, nothing at all. So this is kind of a pretty good textbook sort of hand of kind of like a live feel hand. And I would personally lean on the pacing. Now, from what you're telling me, if you kind of got the sense that he didn't think about it at all, yeah, I might find a hero call. What would be a disaster, and I don't think is going to happen in this hand, is if he was somehow value towning you with some hand that was worse than a flush. Like if he had, ace 8 or something like that. But I just don't, that doesn't seem likely from the story you're telling me.
No, I didn't get that feeling at all. I just felt like, again, if you bet so big on the turn and bet so big on the river, it just doesn't make any sense. And he did it without any regard of the board changing. Obviously wish I had the queen of hearts. I feel like if I had the queen of hearts, it might have made this call a little easier. I think if I was at a smaller stake like 1-3, I mean, the pot probably wouldn't be this big anyway, but I'd probably fold. But I just feel like at 5-10, like you have to give people credit for being able to, double barrel big with a bluff, and the sizing just made no sense.
So you called.
So yeah, so I ended up calling. And he just said you're good, and he was the fun player, so I didn't make him show. I just arrived at the table, so he just mucked. And I took it down.
I have to say, bravo for that. Not just the call, Robin. More importantly, bravo for turning your hand over. So what you're saying is that the guy said good call. He was the fun player. It's probably not a ton of fun players at 5-10. So instead of you waiting for him to table his bluff, you just turned your hand over, right?
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, you want to keep, the guys he's willing to toss 1,100 into this pot as a bluff. On the turn and river. So yeah, you gotta keep those guys happy.
No, I mean, I really feel strongly about that. I mean, a lot of people criticize me. Maybe we'll put a link to that Reddit video that we did with Garrett from a few years ago. And there's this whole thing where he got into it. I think it was with Charles, where he said good call. And then Charles was like waiting for Garrett to turn his hand over. And Garrett was like, you want to see my hand? And I had even said that even against regulars, sometimes just almost like out of etiquette, I'll just roll my hand over unless I hate them or there's some sort of angling bullshit. But especially against like really fun players, I would just turn my hand over. We can get into the debates about the first part of that, whether you want to turn your hand over against a reg or not. I think that people vastly overvalue the information that they think that they're getting by seeing their opponent's hand and the quote unquote bluff combo that they chose. Now, it's your right to do that. Sure, you paid for it, but I will agree wholeheartedly with Robin and just fast playing or fast rolling my hand over in this situation. But thank you very much for the call, Robin. I appreciate it.
No problem. Thanks. Take care.
All right, guys. Just going to flip it back here. So again, we're doing 5 calls here today. If you missed the front of the show, we're actually going to do a Super Bowl call-in show next week. We're going to start at, I believe, 2 p.m. Eastern time. So sometimes if you don't get to see this show live, we will be doing the show on Sunday at 2. Of course, the Super Bowl doesn't start until like 6:20 Eastern time. And that was good, actually, because on Monday the next day, my mother actually has a doctor's appointment that I wanted to go with her to. So it all worked out. And then I was talking to Michael G about it. And he said, we did a Super Bowl show last year. So I was like, all right, works out. Let's do another one again here. All right, let's go to, I believe this is going to be a non-hand call. And this is Christian. Hello, Christian. You're up next.
Hey, Bart. How's it going?
How's it going?
I'm good. So yeah, the hand that I was calling about is kind of a non-hand it's more of like an ethical question, I guess, as to what happened. So I guess I'll give you a little background on it. The game was 1-3 no limit, 9-handed with a $6 under the gun straddle. And then this took place at the rivers in Des Plaines, the Chicago rivers.
Right.
So the pre-flop action, the hero opens to $20 on the button with queen ten of spades, and then the only caller was the small blind to my direct left with a $140 stack. The flop came down queen of clubs, 8 of hearts, 2 of hearts. Checks to me. I see bet for $25, and then the small blind jams for the remaining 120.
Okay. So you have a situation here where you raise with queen 10 of spades on the button, 136 plus 6. You raise with queen 10 of spades on the button at 20. Small blind, this short, he calls. And you flop top pair, you see bet, and then he jams, right? And it sounds to me like it's almost like a no-brainer call, right?
Yeah. I'm never folding there.
Okay.
So I call. The opponent was sitting to my direct left, and he picks his hand up off the table, and he shows me the queen of hearts and the jack of hearts. So I'm completely dominated. He has the flush draw, and he has me outkicked as well.
Now, let me just ask you a quick question, Christian. He shows you, like he picks it up and like holds his cards up and shows you queen jack.
Correct. Yep. I'm sitting to his right. He picks the hand up off the table, and just is like, I probably got you. And he like just shows me his hand, like picks it up and kind of holds it to the side. And I'm the only one who's able to see it.
Okay.
And then he puts his cards back down on the table after showing them to me.
Okay.
Then the dealer, arranges the pot, gets everything right. The turn comes the 9 of hearts, and then the river comes the ace of hearts. So I was dead on the turn. So I've played enough live poker to where I know just table your hand. So I just kind of, pick my hand up, put the queen 10 of spades down, face down, or with the backs down, so they're face up on the table.
Yep.
And then my opponent, says, "Oh," to the whole table. He declares that he has a flush, and then he picks his cards up, and when he kind of throws them down on the table, to where only the jack of hearts is exposed, and like kind of in the motion of when he was putting them down, the queen of hearts flipped face down, so like only the jack of hearts was showing to the table. And he does have a flush. He's showing 1 heart on a 4 heart board. And then he said to the table like, "Oh, I got a flush," and then he kind of sits there with his arms crossed. And the entire table, it was full of a bunch of regulars, so no one says a word. It's just kind of silent. And then the dealer, in very slow motion, starts like reaching for the jack of hearts, kind of like acting like he's gonna muck the hand. I don't say anything, neither does the rest of the table. And then after about 30-ish seconds, the dealer takes the jack of hearts, flips it upside down, so now both of his cards are down against the table, and then he drags it into the muck, and then he pushes me the pot.
That's bizarre. The reason why that's bizarre is the fact that, if I'm understanding the hand correctly, you've got a 4 flush run out, right? 4 hearts.
Yes.
And the jack of hearts is exposed out of this guy's hand, right? Like tabled. So he's got 1 card tabled, right?
Correct.
One
yes.
card. Did the dealer not say like you need to show both cards to win the pot or anything like that?
The dealer did not say that.
I mean, obviously we've seen this type of thing before. We've had these types of calls before where someone either exposed their hand, but then they didn't properly table it, and then a pot gets pushed either like the wrong way. This one's kind of a crazy one because he's showing the winning hand, but much like in PLO where you have to show all 4 cards. I actually see this more in PLO than I see in Hold'em when someone just shows like 2 cards or something like that. The other card isn't tabled, so obviously you need 2 cards to table the hand. I'm just surprised that nobody said anything.
Yeah, and the guy was kind of a newer player. I knew that was the rule, so I don't know if that's kind of an angle on my end, not telling him that he needs to flip over both cards, because I did know that was the rule, and I believe pretty much all the other players at the table kind of knew that was the rule as well. And no one said anything to the guy, and then the dealer pushed the pot to me, and then the guy was like, "Oh, like what the heck? Why didn't I get the pot? And then the dealer tells him that he has to show both cards to win the pot. So I guess that was kind of my question, is like, when the guy was still standing there, should I have like split the pot with him? Should I have just given him the whole pot, or am I in the wrong for keeping the whole pot? Because I did end up keeping the entire thing, because he kind of just walked off into the night after the dealer told him that he needed to show both cards. So I guess, like, what should I have done in that situation?
Well, I mean, inevitably, it's up to you. What would I have done? I would have given the guy the pot for sure. Like 100%, I would have given the guy the pot. If you come from a stance of part of the game is that you have to, there are some like physical mechanics in live poker, and part of the game is that you have to bet correctly, like misclicks happen and you have to table your hand. Part of it is that you have to physically turn your cards over. You are in the right in terms of the rules that you have a right to the pot. Would I look at you a little strange, to be 100% honest with you? If I was sitting at the table, would I look at you a little bit strangely and be surprised that you didn't give the pot to the guy? Yes, I would, but I wouldn't consider you like an angling scumbag. You know what I'm saying? So I don't know exactly what you want me to say. Like, in terms of etiquette wise,
it happened all very fast, and I was like, like he was there, like, because the dealer, kind of pushed the pot to me. He's like, oh, what happened? And the dealer was like, oh, you gotta show both of your cards, to win the pot. And the guy goes, oh, I'm an idiot, and then he was gone. And it happened within 15 seconds. It was a very quick exchange and everything. And I didn't even realize, I guess I kind of did realize what was happening. So, I guess that kind of clarifies everything for me. Because that was my main question, is like, should I have kept the pot? Should I have given it to the guy?
And Michael Perry, 1985, says, you said the guy is new, give him a break. And I think that, and also one of our coaches, Nate, says that, you lost a customer if he's a new player. I think also another resolution that you could have done is just split the pot with the guy. Like, he didn't know any better. Give him, keep him in the game, keep him playing in the game. It doesn't sound to me like, just from me, deriving from the way that you sold the story, you don't sound like a guy that has like a lot of malice. I mean, you're trying to figure out what was the right play. There's just somewhat of an obsession. This one's kind of a special one because of the fact that he wins with one card, but, and I'm not talking about you, Christian specifically, but there is somewhat of this obsession that people have with the muck being like a end all dead zone. I always talk about that the muck is not like a dead zone in most places. Like, cards can be retrievable, and situations where guys want like a certain hand to be dead because an opponent's cards like just brushed against the muck, and then he grabbed them, and then, he went to turn them over and is like, blah, 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 that hand should be dead. People have this obsession with trying to win a pot and, without the best hand, and not having, not correcting a certain situation. There seems to be a lot of that going on. Personally, I never approached the game in that manner. Now, with that being said, I've been a professional poker player for 15 to 20 years. So I always give the benefit of the doubt to sometimes the losing players. And to take it to an extreme, and I know this happened on Hustler Casino Live, and I've also relayed stories where I've actually seen this, where it's quite obvious that a recreational player has somehow misread their hand in a really, really glaring bad way. Like, I'm talking about like misread their hand, like where they thought that they had a 6 and they had a 9, and it was like obvious in a given situation. I think it was Mariano that did this on Hustler Casino Live, where he gave some of the money back, or he gave the last bet back. I think that that's good customer service, but it's all dependent upon the situation that you're in personally. If you are somebody who does not play professionally and you're there recreationally, and whether you profit or not, yeah, you're within the rules to take that pot. I just think that each individual's circumstance is somewhat nuanced, and it's hard to give an overall answer to what you should do in this type of situation, because I think it's really depends on the players that are involved, to be honest with you. It's not so cut and dry.
No, that makes sense. Yeah, and I'm no professional poker player, and by any means, I usually play once or twice a month and just play 1-3, at the Rivers. So, Yeah, no, that definitely gives me a little bit better insight, kind of on the situation and what should I have done. So
Now, some
maybe
people are
if that
saying
ever
that
happens to me
some
again, which
people,
I doubt it will.
some people are
Maybe I'll,
saying that I'm been soft here. Low Limit Cash Games podcast guy says that the caller originally said that the dealer waited 30 seconds before mucking the player's cards. 30 seconds? Silence from everyone, even the hero? Just give the man his money. And that was one of the first things too. I'm quite shocked that somebody just didn't say, like, you got to show both cards to win the pot.
no one said anything. It was a bunch of regulars who I have played with in the past, and they're definitely familiar with the rules.
So, do you think that you did anything wrong, Christian?
I guess in hindsight, yeah, I do feel a little, and that's probably why I even wrote you in the first place about it. Was I felt a little scummy about it afterwards. It was like, yeah, I probably shouldn't have this guy's money. I probably should have doubled him up there, and my conscience kind of was getting to me, and I'm like, well, I gotta send this over to Bart and see what he's got to say about it.
So let me ask you this question: if you saw this guy again, like in this room, I don't know if you've ever seen him again, you could walk over to him and give him half the pot or whatever you feel comfortable giving to him. I mean, that might be a resolution too.
Yeah. It was fairly recent. It was probably about 2 or 3 weeks ago this hand occurred. So I have not yet seen the guy. I've been back several times since. I'm not there 3-4 times a week. I go once or twice a month usually. And I haven't seen him since. He was pretty recognizable guy as well. So if I do see him, I might give him a rebate on that pot, give him a couple black chips and say, hey man, remember that hand a couple months ago where you had the winning hand, and maybe give him a little rebate on it, just because it did feel it felt kind of gross afterwards. And yeah, that was kind of I guess that was why it even.
If you want my opinion, I absolutely think that you should do that. And T Corrupt in the live chat says, so instead of 7 regs and a fun player, we are now sitting with 7 regs. Awesome. Which is part of the problem. Ian says, way to ruin someone's experience. So a lot of people in the chat are going even harder at you than I am, but I absolutely would have given the guy the pot. And this one's an interesting one just because he wins with 1 card. And it's just shocking to me that no one said anything. It really is. And I don't think somebody would have been necessarily out of line in saying something either in that particular case. I mean, we talk about how you're not really supposed to say something when someone doesn't table their hand, but I mean, I feel like if I was at the table, I would just been like, dude, just, and this is a special because he's showing the Jack of Hearts that wins. Like if somebody said, Christian, that was not involved with a hand to the guy, you need to show 2 cards to win, would you have gotten upset at that?
No, of course not.
Okay. Then yeah, it's a weird one, but thank you very much for the call. Appreciate it.
Yeah, much appreciate the time. Have a good rest of your day.
All right, moving along here. This is gonna be Ted. Hello, Ted. You're up next, sir.
Hey, Bart.
How's it going?
Good to chat.
All right, you got a hand for us here?
I do. This is a hand coming from a home game in New York City. It is a 2-5 with a $10 straddle.
2-5. Feel like we've gotten a fair amount of these. 2-5 with a $10 straddle in New York City. I remember a caller from a while back. I'm not going to get into it too much, but there's a lot of games in New York City across a lot of the boroughs. Of course, New York doesn't really have legal poker. I think the closest room is Catskills, actually. And
it could be, but most people I know go to Parks instead.
Oh, yeah, Parks is a great place to go to. Okay, so 2-5, and how deep are you guys? 2-5, 10?
I am the effective stack at 3,800, and it is 8-handed.
So 3,800, 8-handed. Okay, so playing pretty deep. Yep,
quite deep. One thing to note is I have not been running too well up until this point. This probably has been one of my worst running nights. I've gone aces or kings or queens like probably 6 or 7 times and gotten them all cracked. And multiple people had noticed at this point that I was probably becoming more and more of a calling station and calling down with overpairs, which is appropriate for this hand.
Okay.
So in this hand, I am in the under the gun with the ace of spades, ace of hearts. I guess I'm the undergun straddle. So, yeah.
So you're the straddle. You're the straddle with aces, or your first to act.
I am the straddle.
Oh, you are the straddle. Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
That is correct. Ace of spades, ace of hearts.
Mm-hmm.
And then hijack goes ahead and opens for $30.
Okay.
folds around to the big blind, who is right next to me, and he three bets to 120. So a little bit of context about the three better big blind. He is a reg. He tends to be a little bit on the wild side. He plays some pretty high limit games, so this is not too surprising for him. But he does play pretty aggressively. But one thing to note is he does tend to become a calling station when he's stuck. However, at this current time, he is not stuck. So that is a potential adjustment that I may or may not make correctly. So just something to keep in mind. So he three bets to 120.
Okay.
I then go ahead and four bet, given that the action so far, and I four bet to 300.
So
And only the big blind calls.
So 30 to 120, and then you four bet here to 300. This is a cold four bet. Very, very tight, type of, I mean, it's a somewhat of a midish to early, well, with the straddle, it's like a midish open. You got a in-between blind three betting here to 120. You four bet here to 300. I mean, obviously you could poke out here and have some bluffs. It's not like the tightest of all tight types of configurations. Thinking about the sizing of like 2.5x. So if you had gone to 3, it would have been like 360, a little more to 400. Do you think he has like a 3-bet fold? Some people, Ted, don't really have a 3-bet fold button in a lot of cases here.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think given the stack sizes, given the fact that this person is someone who usually plays quite deep, so I wouldn't be surprised to see him 3-bet a lot and call a lot, even with marginal hands. Especially since he's 3-betting out of the blinds with a straddle behind him. It makes sense that he doesn't necessarily want to just call.
Right. So I'm just trying to think about the sizing. So you 4-bet to 300. I might go a little bit larger here just so that I can get more money in the pot with the best hand based upon your stack sizes. That's all. That's the only thing I'm thinking about.
That's fair.
Here. Yeah. So you 4-bet to 300. Okay. Mm-hmm.
Hijack folds and it becomes just a big blind who calls.
Right,
so the pot is now roughly 600 going into the flop.
Okay, so 600 to the flop. Okay.
Yep. The flop comes ace of diamonds, 7 of clubs, 2 of spades.
Ace
so
of
a rainbow
diamonds,
board,
7 of
3
clubs.
disconnected.
Ace of diamonds, 7 of clubs, 2 of spades, and I just perked up there. I don't know if it came out in the order when you saw it, like in the door, but that's always nice. Top set on a very, very dry board. Okay.
Very, very dry board.
Yep.
I think most of the time, first of all, he checks,
right.
And then it comes to me. Most of the time, I think I tend to check here, given I block a lot of the value. Admittedly, I think given my current situation where I've been stuck quite big today, and I've noticed that people are calling me down lighter, it could come across as me just trying to be aggressive for the sake of being aggressive. So I decide that betting is a good idea here. So it's a very unique situation. So I end up betting 210, so about a third pot, and he calls.
So you bet 210 and the big blind calls. The only thing I would say about your comments, though, is this. Remember, it's a 4-bet pot, right? So, in theory, you're almost always supposed to see bet in 4-bet pots unless it's really the most connective of boards. And even if you were to not tell us your hand, just told us, hey, it went raise, 3-bet, 4-bet, call, right? We don't know your hand, Ted, and it comes out ace 7 deuce and the guy checks. I mean, it's a range bet for the most part. I would say on a board like this, you'd be almost always betting. Now, with that being said, though, if at a certain stack depth, there are some in-between hands that get checked here some of the time, like a weak ace, right, like maybe kings that doesn't need as much protection, you could make a case for the ultra slow play in balancing that, which of course would be like ace-ace. But I just think that once he 3-bets and calls, if you go, say, 1/3, I don't even know if there's going to be, he has to call with any pair, right? And the other thing about,
that's what I was thinking.
The other thing too about checking back these types of holdings here is that it's much, much different. I always say, like, when you kind of think about slow playing, it's way different. If you had 4-bet, like say 9-9 or 10-10, and the board came out like 10 deuce deuce or 9 deuce deuce, where you could allow the opponent to catch up, and also by checking back, you start to develop, just by checking, you start to incentivize a bluffing frequency from your opponent, I can't remember the last time that somebody went buck wild, especially in a 4-bet pot, on an ace high board when they didn't have it because the pre-flop 4-better checked back. I mean, I suppose you could make a case that someone thinks that you've got like kings or queens and are trying to get you off of it. But normally on these high boards, people don't start suddenly like bluffing off their entire stack like they might on a ragged board where you flop something huge in slow play. So that's my take on that.
I do think that's fair.
Yeah, so 210 in a call, and we're up to 1,020, it looks like, right?
Yep.
Okay.
The turn comes a jack of spades. So not too much has changed about the board. I still hold the nuts. He now checks. I now size up a little bit, knowing that I've been nuts, but knowing that I also block a lot of value. I don't size up too much. I bet about half pot, so 525. And he goes ahead and calls.
So Hero bets 525, call. So when obviously when you go 525 and call, the pot, putting in, the pot's gonna be like 2,070. You guys have put in about 1,000 or so, maybe a little bit less than that. So you're still left with a hefty amount, way over a pot size bet left, right? I mean, you've got maybe 2,900 to 3,000. The pot's just over, say, 2,000. Yeah, I'm trying to think about the sizing, for this one. Some of his light floats, if they ever were comprised of some sort of like suited Broadway backdoor types of holdings, like a king queen suited, it's like a rainbow board, or something like that. I mean, if he doesn't pick up the backdoor, he's obviously not going to call anyways. I guess my question is there any difference in the calling range here of 525 versus going like 750? What hands are folded off at 750 that are called at 525?
That's a good question. I think in the moment, what I was thinking is hoping that he had a single ace-x hand and that he wouldn't fold out a lower kicker at this point. Or I guess not a kicker since mine is a set, but yes.
But I mean, I think that ace-x is calling anyways, though, on the turn to 750, at least right now. So that's the thing. And I wonder at the stack depth too, again, this is just off of my top of my head, that if this might be the reason why I wouldn't use this bet size. If I felt like half pot was going to get called at the same as, say, like 75% pot, and I was trying to build, I might choose the larger sizing. Now, you also might have a case for like another 1/3 bet, but I'm talking about specifically half versus like 75%. So if I wasn't going to use somewhat small sizing here on the turn, I think I probably would have sized up a little bit more personally, just because I think it's the same type of calling range. Obviously, that's a little bit of detail. But 525 in a call, and now we are at 2,070, right?
That is correct. 2,070, give or take.
2,070, and you guys have put in, you put in over 1,000, so you probably have like 2,700 left, something like that.
I do have about 27 left.
Yeah.
The river comes a 5 of spades. So at this point, the backdoor flush does arrive. Important to note is I hold the ace of spades. Yep. So I block the nuts.
Right. Just to repeat, Hero has ace of spades, ace of hearts, cold 4-bet to 400, right? Call, hijack opens, big blind 3-bets, Hero 4-bets, call, ace of spades, ace of hearts, ace of diamonds, 7 of clubs, deuce of spades, check 210, call, turns the jack of spades, backdoor spades, check 525, call. River is the 5 of spades, but Hero holds ace with the ace of spades. Now, we talked about some of the light floats that could be present on the flop, even with an ace out there, which might be some of those backdoor Broadway types of suited, obviously suited holdings. Although with the jack coming in, that's actually cuts those down, as opposed to if the run out was like ace 7 deuce 8-5, right? As opposed to like ace 7 deuce jack 5. Because now we're really looking at, if you're worried about that, king queen, right, of spades, king 10 of spades. That's pretty, and queen 10 of spades, right? I mean, that's pretty much it. It's interesting the jack cuts a lot of those out.
Yes. So he goes ahead and checks, and at this point, I kind of block out any flushes based on the fact that he checked and didn't lead. And obviously the straights are there, so to me, it feels like I still have the effective nuts. So I decided to go ahead and bet, and I didn't want to bet too large. where it would scare him off. I wanted him to still. I was targeting ace-x hands, so I bet a small amount of 1,200. I mean, not small, but 2/3, 1,200.
Yeah, that's it's interesting to figure out the sizing here too when you block so much of the thick value. I mean, even if let's say the 5 was an offsuit 5 and you really had the nuts. I mean, I know 3-4, the nuts is 3-4. Okay, YouTube commenters, it's a cold 4-bet pot. I know the nuts are 3-4. If the river was like the 5 of hearts, I mean, then you really have the effect of nuts, and then the question then becomes, it's the same question as here is, how much of this particular person will call with ace-x, right? Because if you went bet, and he had like kings or queens, at some point he should be folding off, right? In a cold 4-bet pot, like if he was holding on with queens or kings. So we're not necessarily worried about that. It's more of extracting value from the case ace. Here, the only thing that gets changed a little bit is the fact that once in a while he might have backed in to a backdoor flush, and then does that somehow affect your bet sizing if you ever want to sort of leave yourself almost like an escape hatch where you were ever considering, say, possibly folding to a check raise in a given situation. I might have bet a little bit smaller. I'm not even talking about the escape hatch of it. I just do wonder if somebody has ace queen here or lower, ace queen, ace 10, something like that, suited, or if he did defend with ace-x suited, if that always calls down to 1,200, thinking about, at what point is ace-x supposed to be, folded off. But I think it's pretty close. Now you go 1,200, so you started the river with what we said, 27. So you're leaving yourself with 1,500. Which I'm assuming means that if he were to jam in this spot, the pot would be like 6,000, 1,500 for you to call, something in that neighborhood. And I'm assuming something is going to happen here, or we probably wouldn't have a call, right?
Yep, you would be right. You are quite predictive. He does think for maybe 3 to 5 seconds, and it goes ahead and jams, and he does cover me, so he jams for the remaining 1,500.
Yeah, so like maybe a little bit over 16,000, 1,500 for you to call. I mean,
that's correct.
It's pretty hard to fold given these pot odds, although I will say, I mean, here's the thing, a couple things going on here, right? Some people might say, well, if you're folding this, it's like massively exploitable because how many flushes do you have in this spot? You might have some flushes, obviously once in a while. My other question would be, is there when I'm holding a very, very strong hand and then I get somewhat of a polarized response from my opponent, like off the cuff, I was like, oh shit, this guy's really strong. But I'm holding a very strong hand, like almost like a second nut type of holding. And I'm sort of considering ace-ace a second nut type of holding. It's just the best hand besides a flush. Could he ever be overvaluing something that is weaker? Like 7-7 or Jack-Jack here?
That is definitely something I was thinking about. Given how I'd been for most of the night, where I'd been running really, really horribly, and the fact that at this point I indicated that I was a calling station, calling down with overpairs and strong hands, I thought about it a little bit, and I realized I block a lot of strong value, like 2 pairs with an ace, and there aren't really many other 2 pairs out there that don't have an ace. So it's unlikely now that the opponent has ace-x that might take the sizing. So given that I blocked a nut flush, I think to myself, probably not many flushes. I know you mentioned the king-queen suited, queen-10 suited, king-10 suited, but I think given the flop bet and the turn bet at this point, I think it's less likely that they'll be calling down with that.
Well, I will say, I was gonna go back to that, the flop bet. Obviously because you have so much ace-x in your range. Now you bet like 1/3, and everybody nowadays, I mean, a newer school of thought, even for people that aren't necessarily consider themselves super advanced, I think will understand some backdoor equity in given scenarios. However, I do wonder on ace-7 deuce, if you have king queen of spades or king queen of one of the suits, how often is that even called, even to the 1/3 bet on the flop, because of the fact that you're losing to the ace, right? It's not
Exactly.
it's not necessarily like you have one overcard and a backdoor, or if the board came out, 9-6-3 with one spade and the guy called with king queen of spades. That's a much easier continue than king queen of spades on ace-7 deuce. I mean, it is sort of 3 to a backdoor flush and a straight, but if you have ace-x and him having king queen, and he doesn't have one of the aces, he doesn't have a ton of equity in that spot. Some people in the live chat are almost saying that it might even be more likely that he might have like 7x of spades. Of course, he would have to have like some sort of direct suit. If he's not out to lunch, direct suited connector, like 3-bet calling with like 6-7 of spades, or something like that. This is a really tough fold to make. And if you make it and then you're somehow wrong, I think just right off the cuff here, you're getting probably too good a pot odds. And I do wonder, because it's not like you went super crazy with your sizing. It's not like you polarized. So I do wonder if once in a great while, he might actually overvalue something that he thinks, like a jack-jack. And that would make it, harder for me to fold. Somebody does point out that you do block, a lot of the good bluffs by the villain, which would be something with ace-x of spades turning into a bluff, obviously. But, oh man, I mean, this is a hard one. I don't think I can make this fold. It's just one of these ones where you get wrapped up and it's like, fuck. You know what I mean? It's like, oh God.
I think because I block a lot of the strong value that, such as the ace-x, I think it weights him more towards jack-jack or 7-7. That was something I was thinking about.
Maybe.
Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was going to say, yeah, maybe. Now, somebody said ace-king with the king of spades. I don't think that's like a square call from your opponent's perspective. If he had ace-king with the king of spades, I don't think he's turned that into a bluff here.
Yeah, I think I ended up thinking a lot about the fact that I held ace of spades. I tried to think about potential flush hands that he could have or even bluffs, and because I held the ace of spades, I think that, unfortunately, I think in the moment I was not thinking straight, and I thought holding the ace of spades made it more likely that he would bluff, which is not necessarily the case. But I actually tanked for maybe 2 to 3 minutes, and then I flip over the ace of spades, and I say, "You can't possibly have the nuts, so I have no idea what you're doing here. What are your bluffs?" At this point, he raises his eyebrow a little bit, but doesn't really make any other reaction. And so I tank for a little bit more, and then I eventually go ahead and make the call. Do you want the reveal at this point?
Sure.
He flips over the ace or the 8-7 of spades, so the backdoor flush.
That's what we talk. 6-7 and 8-7 of spades. So more likely the 7x of spades. I think that's just poker, man. Ted, you know what I mean? Like, I don't think. Yeah, I would have a really, really hard time. I would have a really, really hard time folding there. Now, just a couple of things, too, as I'm sort of scrolling through the chat. Josh Shepard, who I think has called into this show many times before, said that he would play jack-jack as a jam here against your sizing. And that's what I was talking about, if he was your opponent. And I would say also here, when you're getting into these situations, you start to think about, well, what about some other hands here? Like, it's like, oh, okay, we've got 3 aces and we have the ace of spades. Would it be any different if we had ace-jack? Would it be, let's say that we had cold 4-bet with like ace of spades, jack X, right? We're a little bit out of line and we cold 4-bet with ace-jack, and now we're blocking jack-jack here a little bit. But we still have the ace of spades. So is that any different than holding ace-ace? And you might say in this particular situation that, well, then there's less of a chance that he's overvaluing jack-jack, right? If you had ace-jack off in this spot. But that's that's a tough one.
I do have a question. Yeah, for the river, if you were to bet, would you potentially consider like a blocker bet where you bet small, hoping that he bets larger, and then you 3-bet over that, given that you hold the ace of spades, so you potentially hold the nuts?
You're talking about from
is
your
that
opponent's
a
perspective?
line that you'd consider?
You're talking about from your opponent's perspective?
No, from my perspective. Let's say after he checks, you bet very small, hope that he raises, and then you jam on top of that because there's just very, very few bluffs, and you hold a nut blocker.
I would
Like I
not.
could have ace king of spades or ace queen of spades or ace 10 of spades, any of those. Is
I
that
would.
a potential line that you would consider?
I don't think so. Not in this case. So what you're asking is, would you ever reverse block in position? Of course, reverse block is like when you make a really small bet that tries to induce a raise, almost like as a bluff. And the reason why I don't like that in this particular situation is the exact reason why you are making that reverse block. You're trying to induce maybe a hand that wasn't going to bluff raise, and now which is almost like a polarizing spot from your opponent. And then if your opponent is somewhat polarized, why would you need to re-bluff that? If he has a bluff, if you make a very, very small reverse block in position to induce a bluffing frequency, to almost make your aces like a bluff catcher, why would you turn your bluff catcher into a bluff? You never really want to turn a bluff catcher into a bluff. This is very, very extreme because usually we're not talking about like ace as a bluff catcher, but that's what that setup would be. You're trying to like induce a raise to bluff catch. So you don't want to re-bluff a bluffing range when you have a bluff catching hand, if you follow what I'm saying. And then
I do.
And then
yeah.
the
Okay.
other flip side to that too is that you could make a small bet that might induce a hand that wasn't going to raise for value, that was just going to call, but might not be strong enough to call your all in, because you don't have like ace king with the ace of spades that needs to bluff off a set or two pair that was just going to go down into check calling mode, and then you put a reverse block in and then you induce a raise. You beat those hands. So that there would be two reasons why I wouldn't do that. You see what I'm saying? Like, because you have the best non-flush hand. So I don't want to turn a bluff catcher into a bluff. And then secondly, my hand is too strong to induce a raise from worse and then come back over the top if I thought that those middling hands that weren't going to raise that I've induced are going to fold to the 3-bet on the river.
Sure. I can see that. I think I was just thinking because I block all the ace X hands, it makes it more likely that he has like very strong value like Jack 7-7 or a complete bluff, and I think that's part of my thinking.
Well,
But
I mean,
see
if you
the point
now
that
if
you're
you
trying to
think that
make,
if you think that betting small is going to induce a raise from Jack or 7-7 and then it's going to call off, that's different, right? Like if you're making a small bet that induces a value raise from worse, and then when you 3-bet it will call off, that's different. But that's two different things, because I thought you were talking about like turning, bluffing with the ace of spades now over the top of a river check raise.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah. Listen back to what I said. If it's, go back and have a listen to like the last 5 minutes of what I just said. I know it got, for anybody, I know it got a little bit confusing, but it's an interesting question that you asked. But I think if give it a listen again, and you'll know what I'm talking about. But I appreciate the call. Thank you very much, Ted.
Of course. Appreciate it. Thank you so much. Have a good day.
Awesome. All right, let's move on here to our last caller here. Guy's been patient. This is Boch. Is that right? I think you've called in before, right?
Yeah, this is Boch.
How's it going?
Good. How are you, Bart?
Pretty good. Are you playing out of Boston Harbor Encore? Or?
Yeah, I do play there pretty regularly.
You're one of the nerdy MIT kids, right?
I wouldn't call myself nerdy, but yeah.
I'm just kidding. Shit. Have you been in there since the change, the room change? Oh, have you been in? So by the way, too, I didn't talk about this. We had Daryl call in from a couple weeks ago, and he's complaining about the noise and about how they moved obviously they moved the poker room like into the slot area, but apparently they put up doors last week.
Doors?
Yeah, they put up doors. I
don't remember seeing doors.
Yeah, no, this happened last week. I'm going there tomorrow, 100%. So I'll see. I'll give a trip report. But apparently they put in glass doors, taking into account the noise, because people were complaining about the noise of the new location. So you probably haven't been in there in the last week, right?
Actually, no. The hand I'm about to call in is actually from last Friday, and from what I've seen, there was no doors.
Really?
Yeah.
Well, I'm gonna have to check that out then, Boch, tomorrow.
Yeah.
Because I put a picture up on Twitter from a few days ago. One of the CLP subs sent me a DM just showing me that unless they took them down, That would be funny if they put up doors and then they didn't work and they
Yeah.
take them down.
Not so sure. Yeah.
All right, so Boston Harbor Encore, what game size?
Yeah. So this is a 5-10 on a Friday night,
Okay.
and game was 9-handed, and I started with 2280 effective. I was effective stack.
2280 effective. Actually, I think my buddy Josh might have been playing in. Was this past Friday?
Yeah, it was this past Friday night.
Actually, I think my buddy Josh might have been playing in this game. Josh the firefighter, Kitterino on Discord. I don't know if you saw a big, burly, like white guy with blonde hair playing in your game. Older, maybe mid to late 30s.
I don't really know who Josh is, but yeah, next time I'll pay attention.
Okay, so 2280 effective, 510, 9-handed. Okay, yeah.
Yeah. So the action goes, I'm under the gun. I straddle to 20. The game is not regularly straddled, but I just decided to throw in the straddle this hand.
So that's
And-
important. That's important that it's not regularly straddled. Okay, yep.
Yeah. So it falls to the button, who is a younger Asian dude, regular at the game, who opens to 60.
Okay.
The big blind calls 60, and I'm on the straddle with 10 of heart, 10 of clubs.
Okay.
And I go ahead and raise it up to 220.
So 60 call and you go to 220. So you're putting in 3x. Little bit on the smaller side here. You're 2280 effective. So at 5, 10, 20, it's not like you're really only just over 100 big blinds deep, right?
Yeah.
With a straddle type of situation. But I would probably tend to go a little bit larger here. If you did 4x plus a call, it'd be 300. Out of position usually goes larger in these spots. It's funny, too. We've talked about this, that actually at 100 big blinds, I remember you would see some crazy sizing from the out of position player as the first 3-better so that people in position couldn't set mine. I remember when I used to co-host Top Section, this was a few years ago, 2 or 3 years ago, some crazy sizing at 100 big blinds, like crazy, like 5x, 6x. Here you got a caller in between. I'm not saying to go to 500 or 600, but it is a little bit small, I will say. So you go to 220, okay. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and both call.
The button and big blind call.
Yeah.
What's the deal with the guy in the big blind, by the way?
He's a fairly tight recreational player, and he plays pretty regularly too.
Okay, so somewhere around 670 or so, maybe to the flop. Okay.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so flop comes down 10 of spade, 9 of diamond, 8 of diamond.
10 of spades, 9 of diamonds, 8 of diamonds. So you flop top set, but obviously the board's very draw heavy. You got a queen jack straight out there and bottom end 6-7 too, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, so big blind checks. I go ahead and bet 250. And button calls at 250 and big blind folds.
Okay, so just a little thing on here too. In this particular configuration, and I'm not saying that you should do this necessarily, kind of reminds me of an earlier call here on the live stream. You could make a case where this board might be checked by your entire 3-betting range in this particular situation, which is interesting because if it's a check 100, I'm not 100% I'm not saying that it is all the time, but that also includes some of your strong hands here too, which 10-10 being some of your strong hands, like queen jack suited, you think about would I check that type of holding? I just want to make a note of that, number one. I'm not saying that I would do that. Would you be betting aces and kings here in this spot?
Most likely not.
Most likely
I'll
not.
probably-
Interesting. So if you're not betting aces and kings, then you're going to be betting some of your thickest value and some of your biggest draws, like ace jack of diamonds, king jack of diamonds types of things.
Yeah, I think so.
Okay. So you go 250, button calls, big blind folds, and now we're at 1170. And of course, you are out of position. Okay.
Yeah, correct. Yeah, so turn, it comes a 7 of spades.
7 of spades. So it puts a one-liner out there to a jack.
Yeah.
Okay.
So on this card, I check, and the button goes ahead and bets 425.
So 425 into 1170. So pretty, not huge, right?
Yeah.
I mean, obviously you have a call here. If you're behind to a jack, you've got 10 outs to improve because, you have top set. There certainly are a fair amount of, well, it's interesting because it's a multi-way type of setup. I'm not 100% sure here what's going to happen. I just will say that just as a very, very simple approach from afar here, if your opponent is decent and is playing the way that he should be playing, he actually will have less Jack X here in this setup, in a multi-way setup going post flop, than if it were heads up. And the reason why I say that is because if he were to hold like a hand like, well, I guess if he had Jack 9 or Jack 10, they all have to be continues anyways. I'm just trying to think of like pair plus straight draws. King Jack, open-ended Ace Jack. Actually, you know what? I take that back. He probably still does have all the Jack X. I was saying that it had to be tighter with the next to act call, but even still, all these pair plus straight draws have to call. So I actually take that back. So he still does have a lot of, he still has a lot of Jack X. Obviously, you have a check call here, and you hope that the board pairs. I would say, like in this spot, he shouldn't really ever have a 6 here unless he had like a front door, something like A6 of diamonds, if he even defends with that pre. Just, obviously that's the bottom end of a straight here. So there's that. I mean, actually, I think what I was going to say about Jack X probably holds true for like a 6. Like he would have more 6s here somehow if the configuration were heads up post flop than what it is multi-way in this spot.
Yeah, I agree.
So check 425. I assume you call.
Yeah, I caught that.
All right. So 850 plus 1170, what, 2020? Something like that. And it looks like you've got 6, maybe what, like 13 to 1400 left?
Yeah, I have it like 1385 or around there.
Yeah, I mean, we kind of washed over that. I mean, I think you definitely have too much money to consider this like on the turn, if you're considering a check jam on the turn. I think you still probably have too much money left. I mean, I wouldn't start thinking about that until maybe 1/3 of maybe like 800, something like that. So you've got like over 13 and change. So I think this is a square call. Okay, so 2020 to the end, to the river here.
Yeah. So river came a queen of spades.
Queen of spades. So 10 of spades, 9 of diamonds, 8 of diamonds, 7 of spades, queen of spades. So the 7 of spades brought a backdoor spade draw, right, on the turn. And now the backdoor comes in. Not sure exactly how relevant that would be. And again, this is actually, okay, so you have a situation here, going back to what I said about originally and what I said about Jack X, is that if you were heads up against this guy and the big blind, and he's playing the way he's supposed to be playing, and the big blind was not in the hand, he would have more backdoor flushes here. But because it's multi-way on the flop, he is absolutely not supposed to peel with something like ace 9 of spades or ace 8 of spades to your c-bet because of the guy behind him, because it's 3 ways on the flop. Whereas heads up, of course, he always has those continues. So there's a little bit of that. Should have less backdoor flushes here in this particular spot. 2020, I assume that you check.
Yeah, I checked, and the button pretty quickly jams for a little under 14.
Like 1380, something like that.
Yeah.
Well, what bluffs does he have here? I think this is even more of a clear-cut case where we can probably all agree that he is most likely never jamming with worse as played. If worse is ever, I mean, for value, right? Like if worse was ever played this way for value, I don't think it jams here. That it would have to be like, what, a slow played set on such a wet board on the flop that bets turn and jams on the river with a one-liner to a jack and backdoor spades coming in. That is probably unlikely. So I think that we can all agree that that certainly is the case. People saying king, jack of spades. Of course, king, jack of spades was already a straight on the turn, right? King, queen of spades, Sure, that could be appeal. King Queen of Spades is not possible because the Queen of Spades comes at the end. I'm just reading here from the chat. And again, T. Krupta says ace 9 of spades, ace 8 of spades. Again, I go back to what I said 2 or 3 minutes ago. Those should not be calls on the flop. Now, maybe they are, but that's why I think that this is slightly different than if it were just heads up. If it were just heads up, the button does have more backdoor flushes, but ace 9 of spades shouldn't be a call with that guy behind here on the flop. So what are we looking at here, Boch? What do you think this guy's got for bluffs? Because a jack is a straight. Now, if he had diamonds, obviously if he had some sort of jack X or 6X, that's a straight too. And then what else is like left here? Like turning a queen into a bluff if with Broadway diamonds here? Like king
Could
queen?
be like ace king, king queen, ace queen of diamonds. Those are like missed diamonds combos.
Those are missed diamond combos, but then you'd have to go back to, well, I mean, you'd have to go back to pre, ace king of diamonds, right? You got a big blind calling, get the button opening, get the big blind calling, and then you 3-betting. I mean, if I were the button, I'd 4-bet with ace king of diamonds all day long, and there would be a frequency of me 4-betting with ace queen of diamonds for sure in this late configuration stance with the guy in the middle. So there's that. Not only would he have to play it passively pre, he'd have to play it this way that he rivers, top pair and turns it into a bluff, which, if the guy's thinking player, he might feel like he might need to do that. But all those things are things that I sort of feel go against you. If we're really reaching for ace king of diamonds that doesn't 4-bet off pre, which should, and somehow queen X of diamond types of holdings, king queen of diamonds, which is a combo draw on the flop that just calls, bets turn, and then turns it into a bluff in the river. You can see how I'm stretching here, right, Bosch?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. What do you think about queen queen?
Of queen queen?
Yeah. Do you think he will like find the jam here with queen queen?
That would bet the turn. Queen, queen, I'm just trying to think about, would queen, so again, though, if I'm saying that ace king suited here is a 4, you guys aren't that deep, man. You're only 100 bigs deep. Like, aren't you getting in? Don't you want to pile queen, queen in pre on the button?
Yeah, I guess could.
I mean, the big blind called in between. If I'm talking about 4-betting ace king suited here, remember, you started at 2280, right? And it's 5-10-20. He opens the button. Guy calls. This rec calls in the big blind. You 3-bet. I just feel like I'm 4-bet getting it in there with ace king suited and queen queen. Your question about having, so there's that. And then how often does queen queen bet turn on 10-9-8-7? I mean, the thing about me holding queen queen, if I ever was in the spot with queen queen, and I got there on the turn on the button, I didn't 4-bet pre, and then you check to me, I don't know. I feel like I wouldn't even be betting for protection on the turn. I'd be starting to turn my hand into a bluff because I don't know how often you're like what am I trying to protect against? Like, if you're a decent player, it's not like you're c-betting ace, ace king here on this board. And you even said that you might not even like c-bet like aces and kings. I mean, I guess once in a while you could make a case for betting queen queen on the turn for value to get, get called by your range of draws. But there's a lot of stuff going on that like leans me towards him not having those hands. One of the biggest things is that it's 100 BB setup in a late position configuration here. So that's why I'm having a hard time with this one at the end where my reaction was a fold. You lose, of course, to queen queen too. That's another thing, right? So what was your thinking here?
Well, I think he could have some bluffs, but I also got like a set, so.
What bluffs though?
Yeah, I guess maybe I wasn't thinking out that much.
It's just one of those. And again, I keep saying too, the fact that he's in there with another guy in there on the flop should decrease those backdoor flushes. I mean, obviously that's less value, but he still has a lot of Jack X here too. And it's not like you guys are all that deep. So, I mean, if I have Jack X here, it's just like, yeah, the backdoor flush came in, but what am I not going to bet? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
What'd you end up doing?
So yeah, before I give you the review, I was actually the villain in that hand. I'm just calling it from the opponent's perspective.
Didn't you do this before, Bosch?
No, it wasn't me. No,
Oh.
no.
So you're the villain here.
I'm the villain here. Yes.
So what do you, okay, so let me try to figure out here. So do you want to tell us what you have on the button, or do you want to say, all right, so why don't you tell me what the guy in the big blind did first?
Yeah, so the guy, or it's an older lady actually, she ends up tank calling with her 10-10.
So the lady, so big blind lady calls with 10-10. Before you do a reveal, let me ask you this question. Did you still think that on the turn when you bet 425 into 1170 that she had like aces and kings?
From my
After she called, I
look,
mean.
yeah, I don't
turn.
think she's gonna fold aces and kings on the turn. Like she seems to me as a like pretty recreational player that doesn't like think all that much. So I wouldn't say she strikes me as the type of player to fold aces and kings on the turn.
So if you're bluffing here, are you trying to bluff her off of a lot of aces and kings on the river? If she arrives there with them.
I think if I pull the bluff on the river, I could get her off aces and kings.
And then, of course, another hand that she might have that she might have run into is queens, right? I mean, that makes sense.
Right.
It doesn't sound to me like you're ever, again, we don't know what you have, but she probably isn't necessarily playing jacks this way as just necessarily a check call. It's interesting because you get into a situation where if you have a jack here, Bosch, you might, I mean, you only have 1380, so you're saying, well, I think I can bluff her off her aces and kings, but what if you have a jack and you have value? Does that mean that you size down at the end here?
No, I think the only bet sizing I choose on the river is probably just all in because I only got 2/3 left.
But do you see what I'm saying though? Like you could actually vary your river sizing based upon what you want to accomplish here. And it's a super sort of, it's a hard live node lock. It's it's a live node lock in a sense of like you could be like, well, if I move all in, she's going to fold out one pair of hands. So if I have value, I don't want to move all in. But if I have a bluff, I do want to move all in. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that I can make a case for that. Yeah.
All right. So she called with 10-10. What did you have?
I had Jack, no spade.
So you have Jack. Okay. So do you think that she should have folded at the end?
Well, I'm not sure. I think like she probably should have folded. But I mean, again, given like her player image, I don't think she's the one to make the fold. Yeah.
Yeah, and the other thing too that I find a little bit interesting with these stack sizes is how you want to shape Jack on the turn, because you went like 1/3, right? Which left like 2/3 on the river. So you could make a case for going larger so that you could leave less on the river so she would get better pot odds. But I could also see a situation where if you went larger, like more like half pot or 700, she might fold out those high over pairs. So
yeah, I think in hindsight, I could have bet 600 on the turn and leave 12 on the river. So it's like half pot for turn and river.
Now, Bosch, lastly, I will ask you, now maybe you didn't know who this player was, but you could definitely make a case for getting in Jack here at 100 big blinds pre button versus big blind and straddle squeeze. She showed up with 10-10. Maybe that's the bottom of her range, but did you think about 4-betting pre?
Yeah, I think I definitely do Jack, like sometimes 4-bet, sometimes just call. Against more of like regulars, I think I would probably make a case for 4-betting more. But against like more of like a recreational, like this lady. I think like her range is probably stronger than the regular 3-bet range.
But you would have 4-betted ace king suited and queen queen though, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
I would have.
Which is what I went back to when we talked about this from the reverse. Again, I didn't know Bush was going to do this to me, but that's why I said, like, I don't see like, if you're saying like ace king of diamonds or ace queen of diamonds are the primary bluffs, that's a huge stretch if you're playing out of the straddle spot, because there's got to be some 4-betting frequency and then turning a queen into a bluff and all that jazz. I probably would have folded if I was your villain at the end.
I see.
But I mean, there's nothing you can do. I mean, what are you going to do about it, right? You got the best of it. So
Yeah,
I don't think you did anything wrong. You know, so.
Yeah.
All right, Bush. If you see me, I'll be there tomorrow. Come by and say hi, but I'll definitely be there tomorrow. Thanks for the call. I appreciate it.
Yeah.
All right,
Thank you, Bart.
All righty. Nice set of calls there. Usually I'm not like way into people doing like that trickster angle like Bosch did right there, but that was good though. That was a good one. Kind of flip it around, right? Looking at the different ways to play certain hands and what to think about in a given situation. If you did miss it in the beginning of the show, we actually will be doing the live stream next week on Super Bowl Sunday, 2 p.m. Eastern time. We might even be able to go a little bit longer. We're always looking for new callers. Of course, if you're a CLP website subscriber, you'll always get priority to be on the show. And if you're a non-subscriber, Michael G., moderator extraordinaire, passes along the best hands to me. Michael G., Mr. Gatekeeper, passes along the best hands to me. But if you don't know how to submit, you can click on the link in the description, and that will give you information on how to pre-submit your hand. Thank you guys for keeping it real in the live chat. Tried to involve you, and lots of good comments here this week.